Yes, and there we go. We are now recording. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is our first customer service support session for the Reducing Over-Identification in Special Education, or ROSE grant program. We're very, very excited for this program, and certainly what we hope to see coming out of this. With that in mind, I want to turn it over to the one and only Dana Ray, who will be taking us through much of the session today. I will be here navigating and dropping links. So if you need anything else, or if you are having any sort of technical troubles with the system or the setup today, drop it in chat, ping me, send me a message. I'm happy to assist. But with that, Dana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin. And welcome everybody. Good afternoon. As Justin mentioned, today we're going to be talking about a new grant opportunity aimed at reducing the over-identification of special education. In terms of our agenda today, you can expect, if you've participated in previous sessions, something similar. So we'll review the overarching goals of the grant, the information that would be most helpful to you in getting started. We're going to spend the majority of our time really discussing in detail the strategy itself. And then we'll spend a little bit of time near the end reviewing the grant processes and timeline in terms of submission, review, etc. We will have a mechanism by which we capture questions throughout. So Justin, if you can move to the next slide. So one of the first things that we would love to know is who is with us in the audience today. Justin, I've already introduced ourselves, but if you could click on the link that Justin just dropped in the chat for Poll Everywhere, we just want to get a sense of who's with us. And then, as you can see on this slide, there is a dedicated, wow, I just saw this like glaring typo in our presentation. There's a dedicated website for ROSE, not Maryland Works, and we will correct that on the fly. But the link there is accurate for where that website points to. And then throughout the session today, after we get a sense of who's in the room with us in the audience, then we'll continue to use Poll Everywhere to capture questions. But if there's a question that you think of after today, then we do have a dedicated email address that is rose.msde@maryland.gov. And you can always email any questions or comments that you may have for that. All right, so if you haven't had an opportunity to click the link that Justin put in the chat, go ahead and do that now. We want to get a sense of where everybody's from. I know that's really weird, huh, Justin?
Indeed, it is. We have not had a problem with this one.
Huh. All right, we can go ahead and skip it, and I'll activate the one for questions. But if anybody has any trouble accessing the Poll Everywhere site, please let us know. The questions capturing tool should be live now. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. In terms of the goals for this particular grant initiative, first and foremost, as you can imagine, we want to reduce the disproportionality of students identified for special education services. And so, the primary resource that we're using today to review this information is the Grant Information Guide. So something that you'll see if you've already had a chance to review that in detail is a consistent messaging around this idea of looking specifically at different student groups, and that might be based on race, sex, gender, home language, and or income status. It just depends on the context of your particular local education agency and where you are finding patterns for over-identification. Secondly, we want to make every effort to eliminate persistent disparities, particularly among historically underserved students who are often over-identified as being intellectually or emotionally disabled. A lot of times this includes African-American students, English learners, and students that are economically disadvantaged. And then lastly, this is another opportunity to ensure that every student has access to high quality instruction and intervention that is differentiated to meet their individual needs. And while you might think that that should be our mission every day and the goal that we strive to achieve, one of the things that we'll talk about later and something that you'll see in the review of the research that we've shared is, that's oftentimes the very first barrier is, when students become identified and then are removed from the general education classroom, that limits their access to the high quality instruction and intervention, or the opportunity for teachers to differentiate within that setting. And then lastly, we are leveraging ESSER funds to identify the strategies and mitigate the long-term learning loss of students who are disproportionately likely to be misidentified as students with either the intellectual and or emotional disabilities. So the information that you'll see on this particular slide is pretty straightforward. It's verbatim from what you see in the grant information guide, but it's essentially walking you through the process at a high level. So we recommend first and foremost that you read the grant information guide in full, that you explore the links to additional resources and readings identified as inspiration from the field. Later in the presentation, we're going to review each of those. But we did very carefully and purposely curate those to be able to support your understanding of what the expectation is for this grant. The third piece is doing what you're doing now, which is attending a customer service support session. And then lastly, as we develop an FAQ and continue to provide additional resources related to this particular grant, those will be added to the ROSE website, which we provided the link to previously in the chat. After you've had an opportunity to learn about what this opportunity entails, then you should assess the capacity of your organization to be able to submit a strong and innovative application. It does need to be based on data and evidence that will lead to success. So you'll need to consider how this particular grant strategy aligns to your local education agency needs. And then plan to use this opportunity to both innovate, but also to consider how you will sustain this long-term and beyond the grant. In the next phase, the collaboration phase, you should definitely identify a primary point of contact and any key collaborators who will be responsible for application submission, and build in opportunities to gather input from any relevant stakeholders, as well as utilize the information sessions or the office hours that MSD hosts to pressure test ideas, gain new insights, and refine applications. And then lastly, there will be an opportunity for you to review the grant submission requirements in today's presentation, and then complete and submit the online grant application, including all required appendices. And part of that process will be you indicating which of these customer support sessions that you attended. So the high leverage strategy, and there's only one for this particular grant, is related to the over-identification of students with intellectual and emotional disabilities. And so now we're going to walk through the pages that are in the grant information guide that are very specific to this particular strategy. So when you think about who this call to action is for, who this grant is intended for, we are looking for 3 local education agencies to partner with a single national leader for program implementation. So 3 local education agencies, in that we anticipate there being 3 awards for this particular grant. Each local education agency submits its own application. And in terms of a partner, MSDE will be the one to seek a partner for this work, and everybody will be working with the same partner so that there will be a cohort experience in how it's implemented, monitored, etc. In your grant application, oh, I'm sorry, Justin. In your grant application, you do have to address the over-identification of intellectually and emotionally disabled students based on, and this is why this is in bold, race, gender, home language, or income status. And so that goes back to, like I said earlier, what you see throughout the grant information guide. And that's going to depend on your local context as to where you are seeing trends or patterns in over-identification. And then lastly, similar to other grants that we've released in the past, you must address all of the focus areas that we'll review in the next couple of slides within your application. So let's dig in just a little bit around the individual focus areas. So one of the first things that you'll need to address, and something that you'll want to do at the start of this process is, or at this, if you're awarded, is conduct an analysis of data to really identify what your root causes are for over-identification. Really, where are those patterns and trends? And although we've highlighted here that that will be through a comprehensive assessment of district policies, including the special education referral process, it can go beyond that to include a review of instructional practices and curricular materials. It could be the multi-tiered systems for support, including assessment and interventions. Some of you may or may not have a pre-referral process, and if you do, that would be something that you would want to look closely at. You might also find potential areas of concern with family involvement and support, staff beliefs and perceptions, including implicit bias. So although we've bolded the assessment of district policies in the special ed referral process, you will need to do a comprehensive assessment of all of those things to really dig into and better understand why over-identification, especially for particular student groups, might be occurring. Once you've done that, then the next piece will be to develop and implement a professional learning plan that aligns specifically to those root causes identified through that data analysis. One of the things that you definitely want to be able to do is be responsive to what you learn through the data analysis by providing professional development specific to those root causes that you find. And we've listed just some of the examples there of, it could be building the knowledge and skills of general education teachers and other staff, particularly in early learning grades. It could be delivering high quality instruction and intervention that is differentiated to meet the needs of individual students. And in the grant information guide itself, there's a sub-bullet for this particular focus area that goes into more detail about other types of professional development that might be considered. And then for the third focus area, this is really around the long-term sustainability of first, figuring out the root cause, identifying how to address that through professional development, and then codifying that, systematizing it in developing and maintaining your equitable policies, processes, and practices. So anything that you determine is an issue and develop a solution for, you'll want to enshrine long-term. And so your plan needs to speak to how you will do that. Just to ensure that the over-identification doesn't either continue or come back, so to speak, recur, that kind of thing. And then on the next slide, we've got a few more focus areas that have to be considered as well. So the fourth one is around this idea of either creating or strengthening, if you already have a pre-referral process. And a pre-referral process is intended to precede a student's referral for assessment to special education. If you've had an opportunity to read some of the links that we've already shared through the inspiration from the field or done any research on your own, pre-referral processes are typically outside of processes that you might associate with either RTI, MTSS, things of that nature. But ideally, it's an opportunity to convene a team of individuals who can case manage and really provide individualized recommendations for support and intervention being very targeted in individualizing what the types of instruction and intervention a student receives in the classroom before they are ever referred to special education. It includes systems for monitoring and supporting general education teachers and how they implement those individualized learning plans. And it also includes evaluation opportunities so that over time, based on what you're seeing through pre-referral processes, you can then, if you're identifying trends or patterns that way, you can circle back and provide the necessary professional development or other shifts in practices, potentially materials, additional wraparound services and resources, that kind of thing. But the pre-referral process, we've got a lot of resources related to that in particular, but it is distinctly different from what we mean when we say MTSS or RTI. And then at number 5, the 5th focus area, that's going to be ensuring systems and structures for family engagement. So the other thing that we saw consistently in the research is the importance of families in this process. And so it's taking a look at what that looks like for your individual systems and ensuring that for students who are at risk of over-identification, that there is effective communication, that there are opportunities for parents and families to support their children's learning at home, that they are an integral part of the pre-referral process, including how that individualized learning plan is developed. It's really helping them become advocates as well. And then the last piece, knowing that in some instances, some districts might already be implementing comprehensive coordinated early intervening services programs, making sure that anything that you include in your grant application aligns to those plans, complements, strengthens, whatever that looks like, but that there's alignment between the two. So in terms of inspiration from the field, one of the things that you'll see is in the past, we've always tried to limit this to 3 primary resources and then 5 additional resources. And I don't want to say we got carried away, but there was just so many good articles and guides and websites and things like that out there that we had to include 10. So I'm going to give you a quick little summary of what you can find in each of those in case you need to prioritize where you spend your time. But they are definitely all worth the read and or the listen. So in the first one, this is about the Berkeley Unified School District, and it's how one California district responds to the disproportionate identification of certain student groups for special education. But it's largely one of the first articles that you'll see that introduces the idea of a pre-referral process with providing systemically academic interventions before students are ever identified. The second one is very practical. The audience was originally school administrators, but it is very much a piece that will walk you through kind of step by step how to develop and execute a pre-referral process. It talks a lot about, specifically about things that need to be assessed and addressed for school climate, as well as family engagement. So like I mentioned in the focus areas, family engagement was a common theme, and this is one of the first places that you'll see that in the inspiration from the field. But it's very much, like I said, it's a guide for administrators. It's meant to be practical, so it's pretty easy to read. And I'm gonna say that now because we do have some pieces that are really dense in terms of the research and the information shared in some of the other formats. The third piece is how a particular California district plans to reduce their special education referrals for Black and Latino students through better tracking and intervention systems, implicit bias training for staff, and dedicated time for collaboration between special education and English language staff. And so that's, I believe, from Palo Alto Online, and that's the third piece that you'll see in the grant information guide as the third of 3 primary resources, or readings, I should say. And then after that, we have 6 additional readings. So, or I should say podcast listenings. So number 4, please take the time to listen to this one. It's not a read, it is a listen. But it is a podcast about an affluent and socioeconomically diverse district in Massachusetts. And one, there are a lot of misconceptions sometimes about where over-identification occurs, and people don't always associate that with a quote-unquote affluent district. But this happens to be a district that buses students from Boston, and immediately district leadership saw the disproportionate over-identification of students of color and really dug down to look at their practices, and made some significant changes and successfully closed their achievement gap and addressed the over-identification. So a couple of the things, just practically speaking, that they did, one was they really reassessed their committee structure for within the referral process itself. Because what was happening was oftentimes the individuals that were directly referring students were also the ones then making the decision as to whether or not a student moved forward. And so they did what they could to try to make that a more objective process. And then another thing that they did that was really cool was just they did an excellent job of, as I mentioned with the professional learning plan, the second focus area, they did a great job of really narrowing the focus of what the needs of staff were, and then providing professional development that was responsive to those individual needs. And then, of course, following through and monitoring and all of those things. But it's definitely a podcast that I would recommend you guys take some time to listen to. And if you're like me, you can listen to it and also do some other things. So it's not completely dedicated. The fifth piece, I made sure that we called it research. That's like a flag. So this one is going to be a little bit more of a dense read because it is a research article on the over-identification of students with learning disabilities. However, it does make very explicit the connection to the disproportionate impact of socioeconomic status, even within African American and Hispanic students. So that's a great piece, but it is a little bit of a dense read. And then we'll continue on the next slide. Number 6. So this piece is going to be, again, practical in nature. That's why it starts with strategies. So it is going to talk about strategies to address the most common root causes resulting in over-identification of students for special education. And like I mentioned during the focus areas, including gaps in curriculum and instruction implementation, inconsistent pre-referral processes, and limited beliefs of ability. And so again, this is a little bit easier to read. It's very practical in how it's laid out and very aligned to those 3 things. And so, for example, for curriculum instruction implementation, it gives you strategies for how to address that. For the inconsistent pre-referral processes, strategies to address that. And so it's concentrated on those 3 areas. The 7th one, this is from the IRIS Center, which is a part of Vanderbilt University. So the 7th one is intended to be a step-by-step training module. And it is literally, its entire focus is on how to develop and implement an effective pre-referral process. And so, like I said, thinking beyond MTSS or RTI or PBIS, it is how to work with students who are struggling either behaviorally and or academically through a pre-referral process, which is the same kind of thing that you'll see and hear about in the Berkeley article that we listed as the first resource. But this one is, like I said, a step-by-step guide as to how you develop that and implement it. The 8th one, this goes back to California, and it backs out a little bit. And it's a discussion of the continued struggle. And the reason we said continued struggle is, this piece starts with this piece starts with a very short story or a short description of a student 50 years ago in the California school system who was an English learner, and where the system failed that student. And then it fast forwards and talks about, decades later, we are still facing some of the same challenges. And so eventually the article comes around to, there is a need, at least in California, and how it responds to the over-identification of Latinx students, which are a minority majority in that state, the need for better data, the need for pre-referral processes, and the need for professional development for staff. And so I'm sure you guys are starting to see themes as I'm talking about each of these and their connections to the focus areas, that when you do start to do research in this particular topic, themes emerge. And that's why we have the focus areas that we do for this particular grant. Number 9, again, I'm starting the summary with research just to give you a heads up that it's going to be a little bit lengthier in terms of a piece, a little bit more dense in terms of reading, but it is research related to the longstanding over-identification of African-American students in particular for special education. And it talks more about the impact of racial bias and the need for the more effective instructional practices, behavior management, as well as parental advocacy. And then lastly, this is a very practical resource specific to those of you who might already have comprehensive coordinated early intervention services. And it just, like I said, very practical. It breaks down and provides individual scenarios for how to utilize those funds and to how to track them and provide support to students. And so again, one of the focus areas for this grant being that those activities for the grant need to align with anything that you're doing for CEIS. That's just a great resource to kind of show you what that looks like across the country. All right, so what should this look like in practice? We have 2 slides for this, the first of which addresses systems and processes. So if you think about, if you put together a quality application and are awarded this grant, and you work with a national partner to be able to develop plans and activities around all of those focus areas, what should we be able to see at the conclusion of all of that work? And what we would hope to see would be first, the equitable policies, processes, and practices that both eliminate or mitigate the issue of over-identification now, as well as the codification of those policies, processes, and practices, so that it's not something that recurs in the future. Secondly, we would expect to see pre-referral processes that address students' needs prior to referral for assessment to special education. And we would expect to see that that's been systematized and consistently applied across the school system. We would also expect to see, and these connect pretty clearly back to the focus areas, professional learning plans that align to the root causes for over-identification, whatever that looks like for your local context, as well as supporting staff in delivering high quality instruction and intervention that is differentiated to meet the needs of individual students. A fourth thing that we might see is a playbook for how departments such as special education, ESOL, and others collaborate and coordinate within and across all of the teaching and learning offices to ensure high quality instruction is delivered to all students. And so, although it might seem like that's something that just happens organically and people do it well, there's typically a lot of room for improvement there, particularly if you're in a system where people do tend to work in silos or within their individual departments or offices. And so being very strategic in looking at how people are working together and developing systems for that will help in terms of collaboration and focus on the over-identification as an issue itself. The fifth one that you'll see there is connected to the focus area related to families and their engagement and advocacy. So systems and structures that prioritize building strong relationships with families and ensure that they are consistently engaged in their children's academic and behavioral development. And then lastly, systems for accountability within the MTSS processes to ensure appropriate monitoring and documentation of results that are related to making sure that individual interventions have been evaluated, deemed effective before decisions are made to assign students additional interventions or more of the same or things like that, or eventually referring a student for special education. So it's really making sure that whatever MTSS processes you have in place, that they are done meaningfully with fidelity, with the student in mind, and not just a quote unquote process for compliance. And then on the next slide, there are a few things that we would expect to see as it relates to the specific groups of students, staff, and families. So we would expect that students will have access to high quality instruction and intervention, including the use of materials that are high quality, content rich, and culturally responsive. If you'll remember back to the first focus area where I talked about doing a comprehensive needs assessment, a data analysis to identify root cause, part of that is going to be assessing tier 1 instruction, including the curriculum that's used. So that's why that's there. The second one says staff have multiple and varied professional learning opportunities. And the reason we said multiple and varied, multiple meaning, the number of occurrences. I can participate in a series. It can happen over time. I have opportunities to practice. And then varied, what is the format of delivering? How much of it is me sitting in a training? How much of it is me sitting side by side, receiving coaching? There should be kind of varied formats for what that professional learning looks like. And then specifically professional learning opportunities that are designed to uncover and avoid implicit bias, but also to build staff's knowledge and capacity to deliver the high quality instruction and the differentiated support to them to meet the unique needs of diverse students. So again, that points back to the second focus area. And then lastly, families receiving clear and consistent communication and knowing how to advocate for their children, navigate district systems, and access resources to support their children's learning at school and at home. So these are by no means an exhaustive list. You can certainly do other things that would provide different results or outcomes. But these are just some examples of what we would expect to see if you create a high quality plan around the focus areas that we've provided and leverage the research that we've shared. In the next slide, we'll talk about some of the data-driven outcomes. And again, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but it would be what we would expect to hear. And so within the grant information guide, there is a required outcome for all grant recipients. And so as part of your grant application, you will have to identify specifically which student group or groups you will strive to reduce the over-identification for. So the way that reads in the grant information guide is the LEA will reduce the gap in students identified for special education services by at least X% for a specific group of students based on race, sex, gender, home language, and or income status. And so again, that will depend on your local context as to which student group or groups you focus on. And then again, based on your data, what an appropriate percentage in reduction that you would anticipate accomplishing through this grant. In the second section there related to staff and program outcomes, some of the things that we would expect to hear as a result of this would be potentially, X% of general education teachers will participate in research-based PD related to classroom management, effective instructional practices for diverse learners, and implementing high-quality interventions by Y date. So for that one, that's literally just, what percentage of teachers or staff might participate in professional development that's aligned to what you identify as your root causes. The second one could be something like teacher perceptions of historically underserved students' abilities to achieve will show an increase of X% based on a pre and post survey as a result of professional development that could be targeted at implicit bias. So again, that's just a sample of what that could look like and sound like. And then the third one under staff and program outcomes, whether you have or you choose to institute a pre-referral process, what we would hope to see would be the district's pre-referral process leads to an increase of X% of students who are successfully completing highly effective interventions, and therefore a decrease of referrals to special education by a certain percentage. And then lastly, in terms of student outcomes, and we could have gone on and on here, but just a couple of examples. The first of which is potentially the number of Black students being over-identified for special education as intellectually and or emotionally disabled will decrease by X%. Or it could be the disparity between white and Hispanic students meeting grade level proficiency will decrease by X%. So again, you'll have an opportunity to learn more once you're working with a partner and really dig into what this looks like for your specific district and what would be appropriate in terms of outcomes. All right, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Justin, and he's going to walk us through the grant processes and timelines, which is also in the grant information guide, but so that you get a sense of expectations, deadlines, things of that nature. Justin, take it away.
All right. So thank you so much, Dana, for all of that. And again, there will be time for additional questions here at the end. So just remember as you're going, if you have questions that pop up, go into the poll everywhere, drop those in, and we'll make sure to respond as soon as we get to the end here today. With regard to the grant application process, as well as the overall timeline, awards, all of that good stuff that you're probably wondering about. Okay, the grant period for these funds will be July 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. We have a total of about $3 million available for the program. That translates to roughly about $1 million per local education agency. That's because we anticipate awarding about 3 grants, right? Nothing's guaranteed. We're not saying that we will absolutely award 3, right? We are interested in the quality of the applications here. And so, that's not necessarily a commitment to say we will award 3, but that's essentially what we're planning on here in terms of what we've set aside and anticipated with the structure of this program. Funds, a full list of what funds can be used for is available in the grant information guide, just like Dana said. We have a couple bullets here, but these are not exhaustive, right? So do refer back to the full list. Typical to what you might expect, I want to note here that while technically speaking, the fund source for the program is ESSER funding, and capital improvements, et cetera, are technically allowable under that particular funding source. Given the nature and structure of this program, we would not expect to see a specific example of that sort of spending in your plans associated with this program. And so that's why it's listed here as funds may not be used for. That's not so much an allowable piece as one that we would not expect to see. So if you're kind of designing this and wondering, ooh, well, we kind of want to use this for capital projects, et cetera, you certainly can ask, but the answer is likely probably not. Or you might be going down a road that doesn't necessarily align with the intent of the program. So maybe use that as a check on your planning. A couple other quick notes here with regard to the decision-making around awardees. MSDE does reserve the right to consider the distribution of potential awardees so that we can try and tackle and identify programs that are after hopefully a really successful implementation of the ROSE program, scalable in all sorts of jurisdictions and situations here in Maryland. So for that reason, we do always reserve the right to keep in mind the geographic distribution of our subrecipients, as well as the demographic composition of those systems for whom the awards are available. As far as the applications themselves, they are due 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 16th, 2023. May sounds like a long way away, and it is going to be May eventually, but it is not now. And so take this opportunity to learn to go back through those steps at the beginning, engage, prepare, work early. It will save you, especially that way, if you get to something and you're at the end of your application and you all of a sudden have these additional questions, you're not in a bind trying to get calendar time with us the week that this is due. We want to be supportive. We want to be helpful. We want to be able to engage with you if you have those specific questions. So help yourselves, help us. Don't save them for the last minute. We've got lots of time here on the application window. So maybe just in your mind, assume that the application's due a month earlier than it is and just treat it that way. Or not. I mean, we all have everything going on, but just throwing that out there as you consider this work. The composition of the application itself is similar to some of the other programs that we have out there. All of these are listed specifically and in detail with regard to what needs to be included in the grant information guide. This is submitted as a PDF document. So what you're going to do, you'll notice the application, there's not a specific application that you fill in, but what the grant information guide does is it provides for you exactly what we need you to write up, how we need those sections to be laid out, what needs to be addressed in those sections, and essentially some examples for what you might want to include. And with those examples, they speak to in part some of what Dana discussed earlier, like, for example, the criteria for success, right? So when you go into the grant information guide, we give you some examples of how you might want to talk about what program activities, outcome goals look like. So not only do you have today as a resource, use the information in the guide to help scaffold your writing and approach to the application itself. Once the applications are in, we go through a 5-ish step review process. First, we pre-screen just to make sure that what came in the door does include all of those requirements so that we don't, start the review and then all of a sudden get halfway in and say, whoop-de-doo, so sorry, there's a big piece missing here, right? So this lets us know right off the bat that what we are reading is a completed application in its entirety. Once we do that, the review committee will evaluate the applications. We may or may not, depending on the content and quantity of applications, schedule oral program presentations. That's at the discretion of the review committee. It is not for anybody to think or worry about if they have or have not been asked to do that. That is just something we leave in here in case we require some additional information. But again, that does not speak to the likelihood of somebody being awarded or not awarded. It is just something that we keep in reserve as part of the review process. Once final review, final approval once final scoring and review is done by the committee, we review those internally to make sure that we have checks and balances on those reviews. And then we, of course, issue a notice of award. That's followed by an official notice of grant award to all applicants. We will notify everybody regardless of whether or not they are awarded. So you don't have to email or write or ask wondering, hey, we haven't heard from you. Are we going to hear either way? The answer is yes, you are absolutely going to hear either way. Timelines start to finish, and this isn't really anything new per se, but this is something that we are, this is a consolidation of essentially what we've just been looking at across the presentation here today. So the program was released March 1st. Today is March 20th. We have additional customer service support sessions, probably worth noting, particularly if any of your colleagues are looking to join. We are going to have CART captioning services on the April 6th customer service support session available. So do look out for that if you or anyone you know is looking to attend and might perhaps be looking for some of those additional live captioning services that will be available, and that will be for the April 6th session. We will, of course, as you've seen already today, we are recording. We will continue to record these sessions and post them. That will include the last session with that CART captioning available on it. Application window, like I said, closes May 16th. Don't wait until May 16th if you want to schedule one-on-one after hours or conversations, right? Get ahead of it. Talk to us. We are here. We want you. We want these programs to be successful. And so all that we can do to support that, we will. But please do not save that question for last minute, because that makes it a little bit harder for us to guarantee you the time that you may need or want or deserve to have those conversations with us and program staff here at MSDE. May through June, our committees will be hard at work reviewing those plans, and then June we'll make announcements just so that come July 1, 2023, performance can begin. And of course, we are excited for that and all that lies ahead. And for today, that turns us into essentially the last session here. So we are going to now, unless I forgot something, so I'll kind of kick it back to Dana just in case, but otherwise we are going to, I'm going to click this next slide. No guarantee based on the other one that the questions are going to come up. I've got them up on my screen just in case we need them as well. But let's see what happens here. All right. Okay. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to pivot right on over, everybody, to this so we can still get a sense of what we're looking at. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and go right in order here. Dana, feel free to jump in with me as I do. You can't unmute yourself. Well, that's just unfair. You should try to unmute yourself now, Dana.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. All right, so is there a page limit for the goals and objectives? So the two page limitations are one for the first section, which is all of that first section, and one for the budget section separately. So just take a look at that. That's listed out in the grant information guide. And if there's nothing specific to a specific section, sorry for saying specific way too much. I'm trying to be specific with my specificity today. If there is not a page limit on a subsection, then that subsection does not have its own page limit. It just falls to the bigger total. Should the JEPA, that is the general education provisions piece. So yes, if there's a 5-page limit, that does include all of that. Yes, so that is correct. So the general education provision statement on page 16B in appendix to the application. Generally speaking, what we'd like to see you do there is just note that you have read and affirm and concur with the General Education Provision Act, those provisions. So that's really all you have to do there. So we do see that, but there's nothing to do except to concur or let us know that you are affirming that work. Should the work of the national partner be accounted for in the budget considerations, and what role will the national partner play in designing how the grant will be implemented if we are detailing the work before they get involved? So I'll kind of, I think, Dana, if we can answer this together, the first piece, no, on the budget section, go ahead and do your build out as you would. And I can circle back kind of around this, but I'll open it to Dana first on any initial thoughts on how to structure and some of that national partner with the application construction.
Well, knowing your context better than anyone else, probably already have a sense of what that will look like. It doesn't mean that you can't pivot once you're working with the national partner, but you should at least be able to frame out what you think that work will look like or what those activities will entail. And then they'll lend their expertise to implement and or potentially circle back and review or do anything over if needed.
Pretty sure I can't improve upon that, so I'm just going to leave what Dana just said. That's exactly right.
For a second there, I thought you couldn't unmute yourself.
I'm stuck. All right. Any other questions? Doreen, I'm going to let you unmute yourself, Doreen.
Doreen has a question.
Go ahead and jump in, Doreen.
Thank you so much. I feel honored and privileged that I'm unmuted.
There you go.
So I'm still confused about your response to my question about the page limits, because it states in the gig that there's a page limit on the narrative. I'm sorry, on the project narrative, which includes the activities, the evidence of impact, the timeline, blah, blah, blah. And so I just want to make sure that it's not a typo, that there is no page limit on the needs assessment or on the goals and outcomes.
So Doreen, let me go back and check here, but I mean, that would be largely correct if that's the case. Again, I think we by design unbound the cover page needs assessment, the goals and outcomes. Just note that the actual success criteria themselves are part of that project narrative, and that is part of the page limit. But yes, Doreen.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? I don't have any other in the poll everywhere. I don't have any more here. So, okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And thank you all so much for attending today. Oh, wait, hold on. I see one more come up in chat. Let's see. Okay, so a question just came in via the chat. Right on the buzzer. I didn't stop recording yet. Excellent. All right. So Colleen asked, does the LEA have to be in disproportionate identification? to be eligible, or can the LEA write a plan that's preventative in nature? And the answer is your status there does not impede or impact your ability to participate in the grant program. I think we recognize that all of our local education agencies are coming at this from a different starting place, a different starting point. Some of this has to do with current levels or current demographic characteristics of districts and what that isn't trending toward, et cetera. But that in and of itself does not prohibit or preclude participation in the program. But we do want to see a really honest reckoning with the LEA's data for where that stands now when you're conducting that needs assessment and grappling with, where you are and what that looks like and what that's going to be. I'll go to Dana if you wanted to add anything to that, Dana.
No, I'm good. I was just capturing that question and putting it in the poll everywhere, so we have a record of it.
Oh, perfect. Doreen asks, when will the criteria for success be available? So Doreen, that's something for the applicants to define. So that's something we're actually asking for. So what we've got here are some examples of what you might use or how you might think about defining the criteria for success. But what exactly those are will depend on your data, your program plan, what you're tackling, and how you plan to be moving the needle forward in this work.
She said, got it.
Cool. All right. All right, so we'll do one more time. Last chance. Going once. Going twice as I feverishly refresh poll everywhere. Gone. All right, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you all so much for attending today.